the racetrack had at that point had a whole lot of outlets that things were plugged into. And so every year when I first started working, one end of the stadium would literally just go off. Right as they said, gentlemen, start your engines. And I had to run down there to see what it was because there was no way to look at it and figure it out. And I go down there, open the door, and there's some guy in a closet with unplugged my rack of amplifiers and plugged his TV in so that he could watch his church service. He didn't want to miss his church service on Sunday morning. And I, he was older, and I'm sure after a year he forgot. Excuse me. The next year he did the same darn thing, and so after that I had electricians put an outlet in down there so that they could literally, okay, you plug your stuff in here, and I'll plug my stuff in here. We got along fine after that.
So now, please welcome the official, non-official, non-sponsor of the Savannah Bananas, but a big fan. Please welcome John Fletcher.
Thank you, my friend Jesse Cole, owner of the Savannah Bananas, and welcome to this Indy 500 edition of 15 on Fridays with Fletch. It's Indy 500 weekend, the greatest show on wheels, with the 2.5-mile track, with the 110th running of the Indianapolis 500 and its special Friday edition, yes, the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile 500. My guest, he was my very first podcast guest last July, internationally acclaimed acoustics authority Steve Durr from Nashville. Steve and I met when we were paired as a doubles team at the Music City Tennis Invitational in Nashville about 30 years ago. We were both teenagers. He's one heck of a tennis player, and he owns and operates Stephen Durr Design in Nashville. He's worked with such artists as Lenny Kravitz, Willie Nelson, Garth Brooks, Kansas, and Alabama. He's also built studios for Disney and audio systems for NASCAR. My favorite project is how he installed a new sound system and served as technical director for the Indy 500 for 10 years. So please welcome today's guest, Indy 500 sound legend, Steve Durr. Steve, how are you doing?
Man, I'm great. Thank you. Very good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And you just got up to Indy today, and so you made the drive from Nashville. You know, you describe audio as an emotional experience. Tell us about that.
Well, everything in audio is an emotional, everything auditory is an emotional experience. As if my girlfriend tells me she loves me, I realize she's taking her meds again. But she can also cock a shotgun behind me. That's a total emotional experience. It's just a different one. So I work in an emotional part of the business. I'm very fortunate to understand the technical aspects of it in order to be able to do that. You have to get an idea of what makes things emotional in the audio system. And it's all about the dialogue and voices. And so I've concentrated all my energy in the last 10 years on making sure that dialogue is clear, understandable, and because people don't know what the drums or the guitars sound like, but they know real quick when the voices don't sound natural. And that immediately knocks the emotional effect out of what you're trying to transmit. So if it's a lot of processing or it's a lot of reverb, you can't understand what they're saying. All of a sudden, you lose the emotional impact of whatever else is in the process.
You told me a while back that when a music, like on a radio station, on FM, for example, if it's really highly processed, that people actually get tired listening to it because it makes the brain work harder. Tell
Yes.
us about that.
Well, I mean, essentially, it's like trying to watch a television show. Most people think there's something wrong with their TV or that sort of thing, but it's not. If you go back and listen to the Andy Griffith Show or Johnny Carson or any of the older shows on television, the dialogue is clear as a bell. You can understand every word they're saying without even trying. It has to do with the technologies that's available now and the fact that people are basically lazy that are doing the production part of it. And so it strains you. You're constantly trying to figure out what those dialogue words are, what they're saying, and that sort of thing. I don't care how good your ears are. There are certain television shows you can't understand what they're saying. And it's not you, and it's not your TV. It's the actual material that's presented to that television set. And all you have to do is listen to Johnny Carson show and then try to listen to one of the other talk shows. It's very difficult from one channel to another.
I think you've used the term trash in, trash out. So if it doesn't start with good quality where they're producing it, it can't be any better quality than that.
No, a mediocre drummer sounds mediocre. I don't care what kind of electronics and what kind of magic stuff you have in your computer. He's still a mediocre drummer.
Now, I've heard the Indy 500 called the cathedral of car racing or the greatest show on wheels. Tell us how you first got that call.
Well, the tradition in Indy's a very traditionally oriented venue. And so the tradition was that the sound system was strictly for dialogue. And so they put a new sound system in and immediately got 15 to 20,000 complaints from people that they couldn't understand what Tom Carnegie was saying. The music sounded good, but nobody cared about the music. That's not what it was about. It's about dialogue. And so I got a call from a guy, Dave Dusick, and he said, "Do you think you can fix this?" And that's, well, I don't know. I'll go look at it. So I went and looked at it, and yes, I figured out some ways we could make it work. And at the end of a second year, the first year was pretty hard. The end of the second year, they got no complaints at all. So they went from 20 to 30,000 complaints. You got to figure out there's 300,000 people there. 30%, 30,000 of them is a pretty darn good number of people that took the time to write in. So at the end of 2 years, they got no complaints at all. So we were able to figure out what was wrong with it and how to correct it. And again, it goes back to understanding that the priorities in every sound system is clear, articulate speech. I can hear you, but I can't understand you is two completely different things.
I read an article, a 16-page article about that installation. It was not a very easy project, was it?
No, it wasn't, because there was a lot of interfacing between things that had been there since 1965 and the new technology in 2005, 2006. And there was a lot of things that didn't want to work together. And then there were a lot of mistakes. Dialogue's real easy to do from an electronic standpoint if you understand it. You start trying to do music and dialogue, it becomes quite complicated. So in a lot of places, there were wires that were hooked up the wrong direction and went the wrong way. We even found holes in the ground with water in them that had both the speaker lines in it and 240 volts. So you had to be very careful. I got knocked off the fence several times. I got some real surprises from things. It was the number of wires that were in there that were not replaced just when they changed something. They just put another one in. It was just, I guarantee there's $1 million worth of copper in the ground in that racetrack.
Have you ever tried to estimate how many miles of cable there is in that track that you've done?
Honestly, I was going so fast paced, I don't have a clue. But it's 2.5 miles around the track, so it's a great deal of connections and wires. And I was constantly trying to find something that was wrong, raccoons eating it, or whatever the case may be. It was a real challenge, and I am so grateful. As you said earlier, I wanted to do it. I couldn't wait to do it. It was a real gift. It was a childhood dream of mine to work at the racetrack, so that was a gift. I knew I couldn't drive, so what else can I do?
That's it. Well, and Tom Carnegie was the voice of the Indy 500.
Yes,
And so when you came in and you fixed the sounds where suddenly people could understand him now, that had to be just like just a special moment in your life to be able to bring his voice to its full potential.
it is, because the system that they had before, it gave me cold chills just talking about it. The system they had before was, I had no low end. It was just strictly like him talking through a horn. And so I added low end and texture to it. And a couple of times we literally hugged each other, almost in tears. It was so beautiful. It really was, because his voice is startling. It's so great. If you go back and listen to the recordings, it's just unmistakably his voice.
Well, and there's so many or so few legendary voices. Frank Fallon was the voice of the Baylor Bears. You
Sure.
have the guy that was the voice of the Kentucky Wildcats. There's
Yes.
only been a few voices that are just those magic voices, and he was
Yes.
one of those. So for you to be able to bring clarity to his final years
Yes.
announcing had to be something special for you.
It really was, and I don't take it for granted. I've got a picture of him on a signed picture of him and I together on the wall in my office. And I actually, when they changed the speakers out, they threw them in a truck, and I took some of them home. So I've got two or three of them that were the original speakers that were put in there. One of them's hanging on the wall in my office with a plaque underneath it, signed by Tom.
You worked with seven different kind of structures at Indy. You had grandstands that were concrete. You had wood grandstands and this and that. Tell us how that created such challenges and how you worked around that.
That's good. Actually, a couple of things happened. One is the front stretch at Indy, which is a mile long. There are bleachers and buildings on both sides. So essentially, it's going down a tunnel. The buildings are tall; they're 9-story tall, and so there's a huge tunnel, like being inside of a pipe. So that took a completely different set of circumstances, acoustically, and with the adjustments on the loudspeakers than in the vistas, which are outside around the outside of the track. And those guys have no ceiling on them, no roof on them, and they have no boundaries around them. So that was fairly simple. The challenge was to get the one on the front stretch to sound great and not be echoes back and forth between the two buildings and keep the same tonality. So if you moved from where on the front stretch to the end of speakers where there were no buildings or no top on it, it sounded the same articulation. And that took a long time. We were there a month working 12 hours a day, just trying to get all the pieces together. Because the way you develop those things is that each one of those pieces that I'm choosing as equipment is the same as an artist picking a brush. This one particular piece would work here, it will not work there. So we took all those factors into play and literally were fortunate enough to figure out all the pieces that made it work. It really was spectacular.
Well, and the speakers you talked about, uh, some you had to point up or point down because the heat was adjusting the sound waves.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because the original speakers were in the infield and talked up into the stands. And so what happened was that that this putting dialogue out over those speakers, you couldn't hear them in the stands. But if you went up on the roof, they were nice and loud. And some genius, wasn't me, goes, you know what? The heat from the black racetrack is bending those sound waves, and they're going up. So we literally turned the speakers so they were face down. In dialogue, speakers work in what's called a wave front. I'm sorry, in a ray front, just like a flashlight. So it only goes where you point it. And so when you aim the speakers up, where they look like they're going straight into the people's ears, the heat from the track was bending it up. So we aimed the speakers down at the track, and it went straight into the stands and fixed the problem. So it was just a lot of goofy stuff like that. That was it just took a long time and a lot of thinking. I'm the last outpost of common sense in my business. I really believe that. And so I'm open to things that don't necessarily come out of numbers and technology. It's like, oh, wait a minute, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. Let's try that. And oh, it was ridiculous how well it worked. So there were a lot of things like that were unusual made it a real challenge. And because it's so big, I mean, you can't just walk over there. It takes 45 minutes to walk around that track if you're listening. And I walked that track on every level with the meters and test gear and everything for days. I got down to about 110 pounds. Not really, but I lost a lot of weight, and it was worth every penny of it.
Wow. Well, so what's it like on race day? Do you really get up at 4 a.m. and tell us what your day looks like on that Sunday?
Um, a lot of nerves. I think it caused me to have a heart attack after 10 years. You get up, and we would get a police escort, would take us through town, because if you didn't leave at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you weren't going to get in the racetrack, because the celebration starts about 7 in the morning. So we had to be there a couple of hours before just to make sure that things worked and that sort of thing. So we got a police escort. They would drive us through town with the sirens going and everything, and people trying to figure out who those idiots are. And then we just literally never turned it off. We turned it off after the race was over, but we left it on all the time. One of the things about loudspeakers that most people don't understand, even with your stereo system, certainly with a really complicated one, they sound totally different when they're warmed up than they do when they're cold. So if you just turn it on and start listening to it, it's going to sound completely different in a couple of hours, because it's just cardboard. And I'd love to tell you there's some crazy thing from Mars in there, but it's just a piece of cardboard and a piece of aluminum. So it has a completely different texture, just like the motor in your car and the tires in your car. They change as they heat up. So I don't care where we work, we turn it on and let it run for a few hours all the electronics, everything, until it warms up, and then we start looking at it. So we don't turn it off at that point in the speed wave, because we needed to know immediately if something wasn't working, and the only way to know was go around the track. Raccoons eat through the wires, silly stuff like that.
Tell us about the funny story about the man who unplugged the sound system so he could watch his church program on TV.
Oh yeah, Indy has these things called yellow shirts, and there are all these people that volunteer to go, drive the traffic, gear the traffic, help people out that don't know where their seats are and all that stuff. And the yellow shirts are everywhere, and they're wonderful. But every first couple of years, right before race time, I mean, literally when it's gentlemen start your engines, we'd lose one whole end of the pagoda speakers, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And it was like you have to go there at that point. We had to walk down there and see what it was, or run through 100,000 people. And this gentleman, the sweetest older gentleman in the world, would unplug a plug out of the wall so he could plug his TV in and watch his church service because he didn't want to miss it. And that plug drove the amplifiers that ran that whole end of the speedway. So the first time it happened, I just went crazy. The second time it happened, I knew what it was because it's a year apart. I'm sure he forgot, And for some reason, I didn't fix it the first year. After about 3 years, I finally had the electricians put his own receptacles in there.
Tell us about there's a par three golf course inside the track and a bass fishing lake. People don't think about that with the Indy 500.
Oh, it's not a par three. It's a legitimate PGA course. It's that big. It's huge. And 9 holes are in the infield, and the other 9 sites. It's called the Brickyard Crossing Golf Course. World famous. It's really a beautiful, beautiful golf course. And then in the golf course are these lakes that you're not supposed to fish in, but I had to go, okay, you guys will fix your PA, but I got to fix. It's funny when somebody hires us to go somewhere, the first question is, do you someplace to fish? Because that dictates the price of what we're doing. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. I love to fish.
I'm going to have to connect you with my friend Alton Jones, who won the 2008 Bassmaster Classic. He
Cool.
actually has been on the podcast before, so I'm going to connect you two guys because he can get you into some big fish.
I'd love to do that. I've
Yeah.
caught some huge bass. I'd love to tell him the story about it. I caught some in Florida that were between 12 and 14 pounds.
Oh man, that's incredible. Well,
It was incredible.
tell us your story about original music versus remastered. You have a story about Michael Jackson music and the Eagles music.
Oh, well, okay. I'll try to tell this as quickly as I can. Essentially, what happened was that the original albums, the vinyl that everybody's trying to get now, vinyl is the largest selling medium of music in America and the world today. And it's making a huge comeback. Even people are buying 8 tracks, which I can't believe anybody even has a player. But cassettes are a big deal now. And so what happened was, when CDs and all this came out, they were bright and edgy and they sounded ugly. And the record companies took the Eagles or Michael Jackson and those records and they remastered them, which means that they added high end and made them sound like CDs so they were more natural to people. They sound horrible. So I have a vinyl collection I've had for a long, long time. And the difference between listening to the original unremastered ones is it's what it's supposed to sound like. It's real. It's alive. You put on one of the remastered ones, like the Eagles. I bought a Eagles remastered Hotel California. I'm doing the garbage. It cost $40, but it was sounded so awful because what they're doing is trying to make it sound like what their reference point was. Everybody listens to things in their reference point. If you've got those little white earbuds in your ear and you're listening to music and that becomes your reference point, you got about the same reference point as Captain D's for seafood. It's just not anything there that has any part of the emotional end of it. And so I'm not an old coot that hates digital. I just think that people should leave stuff alone. My original Michael Jackson records, and if you've got someone has one, they sound incredible. They sound alive and real. The remasters are terrible. That's just my opinion, but I'm pretty good at listening.
Well, you're better than pretty good at listening. You have a unique ear. And so I know that you have said, I know you gave me a CD that was a tone of reference CD to be able to check out my stereo system.
Yes.
And you've identified the two or three greatest natural sounding artists of all time. Remind us who those are and what makes them special.
Gee, John, I don't remember who that was.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, Paul McCartney was
Oh
one of
yeah,
them. You said
yeah,
beautiful voice, and you said,
yeah,
I believe, Katie Lang and I Love It were the three that you had referred to
yeah.
because they didn't have to have their music processed to sound great. It was
Oh
natural.
yeah, yeah. Elvis too. Elvis, the early Elvis stuff sounds unbelievable. The Elvis documentary film that's out now is incredible. I mean, I've seen it twice. It's really unbelievable. That conversation. One thing that happens with me musically is that I listen to a lot of different things, and so that opinion can change weekly. But it's still that same group of people: Katie Lang and Live 11, and obviously Paul McCartney. But I'm constantly searching and listening for things that move me emotionally.
Tell us about how you freaked out Lee Greenwood at Bristol. That's
Oh, you really want me to tell that story?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Well, he had his at this point in his life, he had a big hit record, obviously called "God Bless the USA." Isn't that the name of it? I believe
Yes.
it. Yeah, and now it's really huge because of politics, and it's a great record. And I loved the record when it came out long before there's any political craziness with it. And so he was going to sing it at the night race at Bristol, and the Bristol Speedway holds about 175,000 people in the seats. It's the largest stadium in the world that's only a half-mile racetrack. And so we put him in this great big crane lift thing, and we're going to lift him up in the middle of it, and he was going to sing it. And so, and through a track, we played a track on the PA, and then he was going to sing with it. And so, as I handed him the wireless microphone, I said, "Hey, man, have you ever sung in front of 175,000 people?" And I promise you, he turned just white as a ghost. He goes, "No, I don't think I ever have." And I thought, man, Steve, you're the dumbest person I've ever met in my whole life. He knocked it out of the park, but I guarantee you, he was shaking the whole time. That was the stupidest thing I've ever done. You want to know another great story like that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The guy that's in Hootie and the Blowfish, um, gosh,
Darius Rucker.
yeah, Darius Rucker. He sang the national anthem. And the crazy thing that happens in all the national anthems is that they fly over. There's a guy standing next to the producer at the stage, and he's got a radio, and he's talking to those planes because they don't know how fast to come and where to go. And so he's talking, okay, and bombs really light, and here come the planes. Well, I've had them out over the desert in Las Vegas. They didn't show up for about 10 minutes after it was already over. One time in Nashville, they were supposed to fly to the Titan Stadium. They flew over the darn Tulane Stadium. Okay, come on over. Yeah, there was nobody in the stadium. So Darius Rucker was so cool. The planes were running late. They were coming as quick as they could. And he went, ah, da, 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 and sang and just kept it till they got there. Dawn's early light, and they came right over. I thought that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. He was such a gentleman.
Such a pro also. So as a racing fan, what excites you about Indy?
Oh, as a kid, man, I was so excited about Indy. The older Indy races and stuff like that were just incredible. I mean, literally, I have all the paperwork. My sister took everything that I was a kid and kept it in a scrapbook. And I would sit and listen to the radio because it was only on the radio, Tom Carnegie voice on the radio. And we would write down the times who was, how fast Jimmy Clark was or how fast AJ Foyt was. And we literally my friend and I kept like a log of every year of all those people. So I just became more and more enamored with it as it went along in racing, and just at one point in my life, just made a commitment to myself that I'm going to work at that racetrack. And it was a long time. I was 13 or 14, and I followed it all the way through. And then I got this call, "Can you come do this?" So like, wow, thank you, Lord. Literally. That's what it was. It was a blessing. There's nothing else. Nothing happens without a purpose and a reason. And I woke up every day. I was so excited. I ran out the door at that damn racetrack. It just about killed me. It really did because it was really hard. I was trying to integrate stuff that was from the '60s in with stuff that was going to help me or allow me, if you will, to do what needed to do to make it work.
That's incredible. Well, thank you to my friend and doubles partner, Steve Durr from Steve and Durr Design. You've been watching 15 on Fridays with Fletch. Steve, we will have you back again. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, buddy. It's always a pleasure. I love you as a friend, and I'm very grateful for our friendship.